I think we all know, don't we, that it is possible to live without really being alive. Benjamin Franklin said, "Some people die at 25 but aren't buried until 75." And if you've lost a loved one, you can feel dead inside. Or if you've had a big dream dashed, or faced depression or some other chronic illness, or if you just feel rejected and ostracized in your life, or these days, utterly overwhelmed by all the violence and chaos in the world out there. Some people reach a point in their lives when they stop hoping, stop engaging, stop caring about living their lives, or maybe external forces take them out of their lives, and we've seen this, and some of us have experienced it. Recently, I was talking to an older friend of mine, and I asked him about a mutual friend, how that other friend was doing, and he shot back, "Oh, I don't know. I don't do relationships anymore." And I think he meant that literally. He meant, I am no longer connected in a meaningful way to other people in this world. I'm done risking connection. Even though he's alive, he's dying inside, cut off from others. So why am I doing all this talking about living death? Well, because it connects to these stories that we hear about Jesus today, 3 stories, and it also connects to our own lives. The individuals in the stories that you just heard me read today are dying or dead, each in their own way. First of all, tax collectors. In Jesus' day, the tax collectors were out there exploiting the poor and taking all of their money, and these tax collectors themselves were controlled by the Roman Empire, and they were extracting money from local people. They were charging them bridge taxes, road taxes, import taxes, export taxes, town taxes, so many taxes that the people could hardly survive. And if the people didn't pay, the tax collectors harassed them and threatened them. And then the tax collectors would skim some of the money off of the top, which made them a little wealthier than everybody else, but they were still under the thumb of their Roman overlords. So they themselves were social nobodies. They were pariahs. Nobody greeted them in the marketplace. Nobody invited them over to dinner. And I think if you're hated like that, you die inside a little bit every day. Next story, about a hemorrhaging woman. Hemorrhaging means bleeding, and she was bleeding for 12 years, nonstop. And she spent all of her money on doctors trying to get better. And that tells us right away, at one time she did have money, and hardly anybody had any money in those days. But she did. She went to all the doctors. They couldn't help her, not one bit. And finally, she was all out of money and all out of ideas, and her last hope was Jesus. Now, in those days, if you were sick or if you were bleeding, then society considered you impure, and you weren't supposed to go out in society, and you weren't supposed to be around other people. But she went into the marketplace anyway, looking for Jesus, and she burrowed her way through that crowd to grab onto his robe. Meanwhile, a little girl dies, and her father, Jairus, he had tried every kind of doctor, I'm sure, to help his daughter, but nothing worked. He's a respected leader of the synagogue, and even though he's expected to play by the rules, he breaks the rules, goes and looks for Jesus, and he finds him in that house having dinner with the tax collectors and begs him to come and try to bring his daughter back to life. Now we can imagine how the tax collectors suffered in those days from ongoing rejection and loneliness. And we can imagine how that woman who was bleeding nonstop for 12 years suffered not only from her illness, but from feeling like a social outcast. And the little girl, Jairus' daughter, she dies and isn't in the world anymore and breaks her father's heart in two. In all 3 of these stories, Jesus meets people who have lost their connection to community, and he restores them to life. The hemorrhaging woman, she says to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well." And Jesus turns, seeing her, and says, "Take heart, daughter. Your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman is made well. And when Jesus comes to the little girl's house and sees the flute players and the crowd making a commotion outside, he says, "Go away, for the girl is sleeping, not dead." And they laugh at him because they know that she died. But once the crowd is gone, he goes in, takes her hand, and the girl gets up, instantly brought back to life. And I saved the tax collector story for last because it's my favorite. You know, I've never paid any attention to this story before. I pay much more attention to the bleeding woman and the little girl who dies, but this is a crazy story. It goes like this. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. That's the whole story. That doesn't have any pizzazz at all. But it's so powerful. He met a tax collector, somebody everybody else hated, and he said, "Follow me." And Matthew followed him and became a disciple. And I love the next moment, too, because we hear that Jesus is sitting in a house having dinner with a whole bunch of tax collectors who everybody else hates, and a whole bunch of other sinners as well. And this shows the day in and day out loving subversiveness of Jesus, that these are his people that he wants to spend time with. Isn't that beautiful? Jesus and his disciples dining with a whole nest of tax collectors and other sinners. That's where he wants to be. He doesn't want to be anywhere else but there. And then the Pharisees, these are the religious authorities, they come in and they start criticizing him for eating with tax collectors and sinners. And he says to them, "But I've come not to call the righteous but sinners. That's why I'm here." He's here to bring people who are dead to society back to life. And that's what Jesus does time and time again, either uniting people or reuniting people with a community, incorporating them. That means making them one body. That goes for the hated tax collectors, the bleeding woman, the little girl who died, her grieving father. Yeah, we cannot control dying. We're all going to die at some point. We're not angels, but while we're still alive, let's be alive. Let's not die to our lives when we're still alive. And that's why these key moments in the Gospel of Matthew are so beautiful, because they show people being reunited with the living world. Jesus wants us to do everything that we can do in our lives to help everybody feel like they matter, everybody feel like they belong. So nobody goes around saying, "I don't do relationships anymore." Jesus is all about relationships, and not just with people that it's easy to get along with, but with everybody. Jesus wants us to get along with people that we disagree with politically, that are forgotten, that nobody else pays attention to. And when you work in the soup kitchen, you're doing that too, reaching out to people that a lot of other people don't pay any attention to. Everybody needs their life in community restored. So, in the moment when Jesus cures the hemorrhaging woman, he calls her daughter. He claims her as a member of his family, God's family, and the family to which we all belong. Even in this world that is riddled with division and violence, let's keep working our way back with God's help to this core truth about what it means to be a human being. We are, and only ever have been, one family, just one. Amen.